The Star and D'Amico Show is brought to you by cheapesttshirts.ca. If you're looking for quality gear without overpaying, shop cheapesttshirts.ca. Huge selection for men, women, and kids. Tees, hoodies, headwear, bags, and more. Proud Montreal business. Order today, ship today, delivery tomorrow. That's cheapesttshirts.ca. Local, fast, and affordable. Brought to you by instacustoms.com. Do you need custom gear from a local Montreal business? Instacustoms.com has you covered. Custom shirts, hoodies, hats, and more made your way. Fast turnaround, great quality, and proudly Montreal-based. Check out instacustoms.com. Brought to you by Cabletel. For trusted alarm systems in Quebec and Eastern Ontario, choose Cabletel. Over 20 years of expert installation and top-tier protection for homes and businesses. Check out Cabletel.com. Email them info@Cabletel.com. It's Cabletel. Peace of mind you can count on. Brought to you by Morella's Steakhouse. Looking for an unforgettable night out? Morella's Steakhouse on Highway 132. It's just 15 minutes from Montreal, serving up premium cuts and bold flavors, and no tax on your bill. Book your table tonight at morellassteakhouse.ca. Taste excellence tonight. Brought to you by Little Bear Pet Store. Give your pet the best with Little Bear. Online, littlebearonline.com. A family-owned business in Montreal for 30 years. Chuck, Evie, and their amazing staff. Top brands, great prices, and real care for your pets. Shop online or visit them on St. Catherine across from Westmount Square. Brought to you by McLean's Pub. Head over to McLean's Pub, 1210 Peel Street in the heart of downtown Montreal. Great food, cold drinks, and big games on all the screens. Classic pub grub and an unbeatable vibe. McLean's Pub, good times and great company. With Marco D'Amico, I'm Sean Starr. Thanks so much for being with us. Lots to get into today. The topic du jour, the Montreal Canadiens, as we get and march towards the NHL trade deadline. Mr. Marco D'Amico, great to have you back as always. You were missed, no doubt, but here we are with a fresh week and lots to talk about. But the subject du jour, I suppose, is as we get to the NHL trade deadline and the Montreal Canadiens cupboards, they're pretty plentiful. There's no drought within the Montreal Canadiens when it comes to assets, NHL-ready players at the American Hockey League that are perhaps all-star bound. In particular, Adam Engström, one of 4 Laval Rocket members of the organization, 3 players, Laurent Dauphin, not David Reinbacher, Jacob Fowler, and Adam Engstrom, and coach Pascal Vincent. I have Reinbacher on the brain because I want to ask you quickly, good news, bad news that Reinbacher not an AHL All-Star, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But in the here and now, as we get to the NHL trade deadline, what about these assets? What about someone like Adam Engstrom? Let's start there. You know, he's having a great season with the Rocket in 25 games, Marco. He's got 6 goals and 20 points. We saw him play 11 games for the Montreal Canadiens. Unfortunately, the offense didn't transition from the AHL to the NHL. But when it comes to analyzing and looking forward, I mean, how attractive is Adam Engstrom in terms of ranking assets that if the Montreal Canadiens are going to make a deal with the team that wants to make a deal with them, is this someone that is perhaps attractive to other teams looking to build up their defensive core?
Absolutely. I think, he is one of the best defensemen in the American Hockey League level right now. And, you look at his age, you look at his build. He's not a small guy. Last time I checked, 6'2", in the 200-pound area, I think in the 190s as of late. This is a guy that could play physical, that could play both ends of the ice, that is going to be offensive, and that could play on your special teams. So there's a lot of value there, and he could play both left and right. So there is a lot of value in him. There's a lot of value in keeping him, mind you, but there's a lot of value in terms of, the hype around him. And I don't think the 11 games that he played in the NHL really did anything to hurt that hype. I think he showed that he could hang. And I think the numbers game is basically the main reason why he's in the American Hockey League right now, because if they kept him, they would have had to waive either Arbor Jacki or, in this case, Jaden Struble. And I think that would be pretty bad asset management. There's no rush to get Adam Engstrom to the NHL. And I think if a deal comes to pass where one of the Canadiens defensemen, that are pushing or that are in the show, like a Struble, like an Engstrom, or perhaps even a David Reinbacher, if those names are on the table for a big trade where they're looking for, a blue chip defensive prospect, well, you have at least one that's trending in the right direction. And David Reinbacher obviously, has the build to be a solid top 4 defenseman in the NHL. So you have options if you're the Canadiens.
I like that you bring up David Reinbacher's name. So, like, the acquisition of Noah Dobson was perhaps a turning point in several areas for the organization, right? I mean, Emil Heineman, a couple of first-round picks. They land Dobson. They sign him to an extension. He's the highest paid player on the Canadiens, and pretty much a pillar on the right side for Martin St. Louis. David Reinbacher, with the old cliche of if you want to get, you got to give. And, in the here and now, Oliver Kapanen has done a solid job of playing his role next to Slafkovsky and Demidov on the Canadian second line. So I
Yep.
don't know where the priority ranks for Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes as they strategize about the 2C role in the here and now and down the road. But if the Canadians are looking to round out the number one line. Alex Texier, while you're off on your Mexican scouting assignment, inks a 2-year, $5 million extension. I think anybody that pays attention to this team in a serious context, Marco, doesn't think of Alex Texier, no disrespect, as the long-term fixture on the Canadiens' number one line. So,
No.
let's tackle that subject. And David Reinbacher obviously is a commodity. He was a very high value draft choice, a controversial one at the time. But let's talk about what Noah Dobson has done to the depth on the right side. And here's a point blank question: has it kind of made David Reinbacher expendable in order to round out the number one line if that's what the Canadiens are looking to do?
Mm. I
Mm.
think, yeah, I think it's a difficult thing to say with certainty. Um, what I would maybe go where I would say I don't think that Dobson made Reinbacher expendable. I think he made Logan Mailloux expendable, and that's why he was traded. Um, where I think I would take it though is having Noah Dobson, Engstrom being able to play on the right, and the emergence of Bryce Pickford
Mm.
give the Canadians maybe a little bit more. What's the word here? A little bit more assurances. Where if a monumental deal for a can't miss top line player became available, and the top prospect that's asked for is Reinbacher because that team is weak on the right side of their defenses, and every team is looking for that kind, either a top 6 center or a top right shot defenseman. Every team is looking for that. And
Hmm.
so I feel like the acquisition of Dobson put the Canadians in the driver's seat where they could trade from their defense from a position of strength on a consistent basis. Because now you have Matheson, Dobson, Hudson, and to a lesser degree, even Caden Gooley signed long term. So the way that you're structured, that's your top 4, and then you basically got to fill out the bottom, unless Gooley is ever put on the block or utilized in a larger trade. I mean, they have options, and I think that's the key here. They have
Right.
options. But then when you have Bryce Pickford, and I don't want to get ahead of myself because this is the WHL, this is the dub, it's junior. Don't get ahead of yourself. But the only thing I say is Bryce Pickford's progression curve, dating back to last year, has been so high, and the Canadians are so happy with him that they even went about giving him his entry level contract prior to the year of 2026. The reason they did that is twofold. Number one, they signed him in 2025 because his signing age was 19 years old, because he was 19 years old in the calendar year of 2025. If you would have signed him now, he would have been 20 years old. His contract would have burned his first year already.
Mm.
So they gave him his money right away. So they give him your signing bonus the moment you get your money, but the contract doesn't kick in until next year. But they got control over a player. This is something that needs to be studied a little bit and taken with a little bit more seriousness, because the Canadians have always taken their times with their overagers. We all remember Harvey Pinard, Jared Davidson, Xavier Simoneau, all these guys that were drafted as 19 or 20-year-olds. They made them sign American Hockey League deals after their junior eligibility. And then they signed them to their entry-level contracts. Well, they didn't wait for Bryce Pickford. And I think that says enough on what the Canadians think about Bryce Pickford. And since signing, he hasn't really slowed down. He broke the modern-day WHL record for goals for a defenseman. He leads I'm not mistaken, the entire CHL in goal scoring right now. Like this is a special season, and there's reason to believe that this could continue at the pro level. So if you have a guy like him who plays physical, has good size, I think he's 6'1" and probably tops out around like 195 pounds. So like he's not a small player.
No.
This is a guy that you could potentially count on the right side of your defense in maybe 2 to 3 years. So then that changes the dynamic for the Canadiens because, well, it's not just David Reinbacher or bust. You now have Pickford, Engstrom, and Reinbacher, and you can kind of play from a position of strength there too. And so that's why I believe that there is a world where David Reinbacher could be used in a big trade. And I look at teams that are looking to get younger on their defenses, that have players that other teams want. You know, you could scratch the Rangers off just because, you know, Drury and Gorton don't get along since Gorton left the Rangers the way he did. But you look at teams looking to get younger on defense, the St. Louis Blues, the Nashville Predators. You know, I could go on. Yeah, the Vancouver Canucks, though, I think they're pretty set on the right side of their defense. I think it's mostly the left. These are teams that want to get younger, and there's going to be other teams that are added to that. The Calgary Flames. You know, so I think that affords the Canadiens the flexibility to do a hockey trade if what they feel is a can't miss fit, similar to how they saw it with Dobson, becomes available. They would be able to jump in and, you know, deal from a position of strength.
There's Marco D'Amico with RG Media. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube show. It's the Star and D'Amico Show on youtube.com and wherever you get your audio podcast platforms like iHeartRadio. I want to talk a little bit more about David Reinbacher and why I would be, I don't know, a little concerned. But quickly, would you guess that, I mean, of all the teams you mentioned, if they're calling and Kent Hughes is trying to work the phones and work the angles, is David Reinbacher, like, would you say he's the number one ask right now of players that aren't on the Montreal Canadiens roster?
That would probably be Michael Hage, to be honest with you. Just the hype on Michael Hage is sizzling at this point. You know, mixed bag this weekend. I think he got 2 points in 2 games. One game was shut out. The other game, goal and an assist. But still got the dub on both of those games. So, you know, that's what counts with Michael Hage.
So Reinbacher number 2 then?
So
Fowler number 2.
Fowler number 2, maybe. So the thing is that, and I was talking to a scout about this, is that, you know, like Montreal's top prospects that they've drafted since this rebuild are all on the team right now.
Yeah.
So this is seen as kind of like the second wave of quality. And it's almost ironic that the second wave of quality, all of those players have taken a step up this year, except for Reinbacher. Reinbacher's still trying to, he had a good month of November, and then Engstrom got called up and he was asked to be the number 1 defenseman, and there was a little bit of struggle going on. He's since found his rhythm, I would say, but still some things to work on. My question is, how long are the Canadiens willing to wait before saying, you know, maybe the player that we saw or that we envisioned when we drafted him, he's just not going to get there because of the injuries or whatever, and you try to make the most of his value when you can, because he's still not that far removed from his draft, where his draft pedigree is not there. And there are a lot of teams that tried to trade up, not for Michkov, but for him or Ryan Leonard, for example. So there's a couple of teams that I know value him quite well and feel that, you know, maybe in a different environment. It just feels like there's bad juju right now with David Reinbacher and the Montreal Canadiens. Maybe he would be better off outside. Well, it's because the microscope is completely on him, and on him in a way that hasn't. I don't feel like Michael Hage had that kind of, or has that kind of, you know, microscope on him the way that David Reinbacher does, because David Reinbacher was a 5th overall pick. Well, that plays 2 ways. Yes, there's a lot of pressure on the player, but then teams remember that he was drafted 5th overall. And there were some teams that had him that high on their list, and there were some teams that didn't. And I think that's where it kind of plays out. So yeah, he could potentially become available. I could see a world where he is traded, maybe not this season, but maybe a summer deal. If the Canadiens do either shore up the right side of their defense, feel like Engstrom can make the jump full time. They're trying Arbor Jacki at the right side right now as we speak. So it's something to keep an eye on. But I think it's the acquisition of Noah Dobson, the steady development of Adam Engstrom, and the offensive and overall explosion of Bryce Pickford that make it so that the Canadiens could be comfortable moving out a piece like David Reinbacher. I think that's where they're at right now. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying that internally, I wouldn't be shocked to hear that the Canadiens would consider it if it were a blockbuster like we saw with Noah Dobson, but a forward.
The old school hockey guy in me, like, you make a lot of sense with the breakdown, but I look at the complexion, the style of players the Canadiens have at the NHL level on defense, and it's lopsided. Like the scale is tilted to offensive-minded players, led by Lane Hudson and Noah Dobson. Mike Matheson tasked to a defensive role, but he's a beautiful skater and can help drive the offense. A lot of pressure then on Arbor Jacki to be that guy on the right side. It's just, for me, that's in the here and now without a deep analysis, because I'm not an NHL scout. The skill set that a David Reinbacher, perhaps Marco, could blossom into, to me, is an area of need. Someone that is big, someone that can play physical, and that can play a sound, defensively structured game, when the Montreal Canadiens tend to have guys that are skew more towards the offense. When it comes to playoff time and being tough in front of your goaltender. Personally, in my opinion, I'd like to see the Canadiens get a little bit better in that department. And I can't help but think that David Reinbacher makes them better in that department today. So it's
part of me
I
thinks
get a little like, ooh, Reinbacher. I get it. If you're going to get, a top 3 player to play next to Suzuki and Caulfield, I'm here for that discussion.
Yeah. I think that's where they're at. And I think that's something you need to factor in. You got to give to get. And I think they have the replaceable pieces. The good news is the kind of defenseman you're looking for doesn't cost that much. Right. The top pair right shot defenseman costs that much, and that's what the Canadiens pay when they went to get Dobson. Now you can fill out your lineup behind him with a little bit more assurance, because I believe that a guy like Engstrom could potentially play, on a second pair, worst case, a third pair, left or right, doesn't matter. And then we have to see what Bryce Pickford becomes. But to acquire the top 4 defensemen or, a bottom pair bruiser, the Canadiens can do that when they're in their contention window. They'll be, using their draft picks to be able to improve. And I think that's where you can go and kind of get that player. What's really hard to get when you're in your contention window is that top end forward, which I feel like the Canadiens are missing one more.
There's Marco D'Amico with RG Media, and of course, the co-host of Star and D'Amico on YouTube.com and wherever you get your audio podcast platforms. Buckle up, Hab fans. NHL trade deadline and the Olympic break first, and then the NHL trade deadline. So lots to cover. So keep it locked here. Make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already, so you get daily coverage for your Montreal Canadiens. Marco, thanks as always, man.
Always a pleasure, man.